Some myths about wineries. You don't need any special transportation, no fancy car. The weather doesn't have to be perfect. It can be raining. You don't need to bring your own glasses. Just bring yourself. Also, if you walk into a winery and you don't think it's the right place you want to be, just walk out. There are plenty others to go to.
What are we drinking here today on this wonderful sunny afternoon?
Well, today we're going to enjoy a little Emerson Vineyards Pinot Noir. Typical of any Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, Emerson's is very similar to a lot of others, very good. Some blackberry, hints of currant, very mellow. It's a wine that you can sit back and just enjoy.
What are some interesting things to do on a Friday night?
Well, there's always a lot to do around Corvallis, but something that I find quite interesting is going to a winery for a picnic on a Friday evening. And there are several places you can go. One of them is Emerson Vineyards in Monmouth.
What other wineries are close to Corvallis?
Well, a few miles past Emerson is Airlie Winery, another great place to go. South of Corvallis, you've got Thai Winery, about 12 miles or so south. And if you go down as far as Monroe, you've got Sweet Earth Vineyards and Benton Lane Winery. Some myths about wineries. You don't need to know anything about wine. You don't need to know anything about red wines, white wines, dessert wines. They'll explain it to you. You don't necessarily need a large group of people. You can actually go alone or with a friend. You can probably meet a lot of good people there and enjoy some conversations. Here are a few truths about wineries. You'll probably have to pay a tasting fee even if you buy a bottle of wine at some winery. One big issue, wineries are typically only open from 11 to 5, 1 to 5. After 5 p.m., you're not going to go wine tasting most of the time. You're probably not going to find food at most wineries. At best, you're probably going to get a cheese plate that's probably going to be quite expensive. You probably want to bring your own food if you're really going to go out for an afternoon of wine tasting. If you're going to wine taste in the Willamette Valley, unless it's a holiday weekend, you're probably going to have no problem with crowds. You're probably sometimes going to be alone. As far as tasting rooms go, some are 10 by 10 room, others are quite elaborate. So you're just going to have to learn by experience or perhaps ask some questions before you go. And don't be deceived. Just because a winery looks like a palace, it may not be the best wine. Some of the best wine I've tasted have come from small wineries and less than fancy tasting rooms. It's not unusual to have a winery purchase grapes from other vineyards that only grow grapes. Sometimes you'll find it Southern Oregon, those grapes are processed in California, and sometimes some of Oregon's grapes are processed in Washington State. Another point that's happened the last few years, China is buying lots of wine from the Willamette Valley. Perhaps it's cheaper to buy Oregon Pinot Noir in Beijing than it is in the Willamette Valley. Jacket and tie are definitely an option if you're going to go wine tasting in Oregon. Someone just said to me, what's a better idea? Going to the supermarket, getting a bottle of wine and going to the park, or going wine tasting? Well, obviously I've done both. My choice is I want to go wine tasting at a winery. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fancy place. It's the whole ambiance. It's getting away. It's having a conversation. But remember this, wines can be expensive. It's always curious to me how sometimes it's cheaper to buy a bottle of wine from France or Italy than it is local. I find the wineries in Oregon to be a much more relaxed atmosphere. Recently, I visited Virginia, some wineries there. I almost felt like a horse at a trough. You went from station to station. It wasn't that personal touch, just not an easy feeling. In the course of visiting a lot of wineries in the Willamette Valley, I've had an opportunity to chat with the owners, and I find that when you get to know these folks, they really do want you to enjoy the experience. That's not always the case, but most of the time you will enjoy the experience.